like that. But anyway, it's a challenge. Okay, to continue, General Mann now will give us his perspective on where we are from his perspective. And get your questions ready now, gang. How about a nice hand?
Well, good morning, and we say this a lot when we have forums like this where we recognize General Sullivan, but I think it's fair to say that he doesn't have to do what he's doing. Obviously, he could do other things and relax on the porch, but he doesn't because he loves our Army. So please indulge me. Let's give him a round of applause, please. It's kind of like Old Home Week. Every time I come to these forums, I see a lot of folks that I've had the opportunity to serve alongside. And it's really something because y'all start looking younger to me and I start feeling older. But hopefully that will change at some point. Also, I want to thank Lieutenant General Swan, my battle buddy for these different forums. It's really something over my career to see how air and missile defense has kind of evolved over time. And many of us that served in SHORAD units remember we were kind of always relegated to the back of the talk unless you were really forceful, and how we've kind of moved to the front of the talk to a certain extent. So it's kind of a good environment, quite frankly, to be in. Just to reflect on that, if you looked at right now, we are doing these senior executive forums every couple of months. General Rossi joins me at these different forums, and it's an opportunity for us to share with the leadership of AUSA as well as some of our industry partners what's going on, some of the challenges that we face and where we really need some advocates to help us with engagements on the Hill and elsewhere. So again, General Swan, thank you very much for that. And the fact that we have a hot topic, that's devoted to air and missile defense really shows a lot about the importance of what we bring to the fight. So again, I thank you all for joining us this morning. Also want to say thank you to Mr. Tyson. Again, he's going to be leaving us at a certain point here. But sir, what you have done in support of the Army and how you've really helped us resource the force. God bless you. And let's give him a round of applause. Thank you for your service. Okay, I want to go over some points, and I'm going to be brief, succinct to the point, I promise. And no video, by the way. I'm not going to show my shameless video about SMDCR threats, so don't worry, because I really want to make sure that I allot some time for any questions that you may have. This community here is well informed on the nature of the threat out there, the complexity, the ambiguity, the unpredictability, mobile, survivable systems that we see out there, the range, the accuracy, and also, really to put it in very simple terms, the cheapness of some of these technologies that you can get off the open source net or the internet. And we all know that we have the world's best Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and so again, kind of goes back to what General Sullivan was saying. I don't think we have to worry too much necessarily about folks wanting to take us on in those typical force-on-force engagements, but they are looking at our vulnerabilities. And the cyber obviously is one of the key areas that we're also looking at very, very closely in ballistic missile defense. So again, that's the reason why you see that uptick in threat systems and what they're trying to pursue in a very cost-informed manner to get after some potential vulnerabilities. We're also seeing some advancement in both solid and liquid propulsion technologies. We all have heard about ballistic and cruise missile advancements. The Chinese are pursuing actively anti-ship ballistic missiles as well as Iran. And the Chinese also have developed and have tested, I think we're up to like 5 or 6 tests now, of a hypersonic, hyperglide vehicle that has anti-access, anti-denial capabilities. It's very, very, it's a problem set, and quite frankly, if you look at it from a ballistic missile defense perspective, it's a very challenging threat picture that we need to consider. Iran is expected, despite the recent agreement, is expected to only increase their ballistic missile development. Their president, let me just read this, recently said, Iran will not accept any limitations on its missile program and is calling for an acceleration for the production of various missiles. Again, very vexing. North Korea continues to improve their rolled mobile capabilities. Their recent space launch, the technology that was used to put that on orbit, obviously has applications in terms of ICBMs. In fact, we're tracking that. I think in the open source you have seen that although it's on orbit, I don't know if we verify that it's actually transmitting. But what concerns me about that is if you look at the previous space launch, the payload on this most recent space launch was almost double in weight. And so, again, if you're trying to mate a payload onto an ICBM and you're getting after the weight aspects of it, again, it's a challenging perspective. To counter these threats, many of you in this audience have been key players in our efforts to really get after this, whether it's maintaining our systems, whether it's training the force, whether it's exploiting new technologies, or whether it's just modernizing what we already have on the team. But we all know it's going to require additional resources. We're also looking, and General Rossi and his team are really looking at this very, very closely, about our SHORAD capabilities. And we all know a decision was made to take that structure basically out of the force years ago. But what we're seeing in Jen Eichhoff's neck of the woods in terms of UAVs and what the Russians are using, that's something for us to go back and kind of revisit. How do we address UAVs? How do we address potentially cruise missiles in the future? And so, again, if you're looking for job stability, for those of you that are still on the team, you have it, quite frankly. Yeah. Some information or some news about the budget environment, and Don really kind of talked about FY17, but I think it's also important that we take a step back and look at FY16, what we're executing this year. And thanks to Congress, we did get some support in this function area. If you look at MDA's account, MDA got a plus up for this current year, and also Congress has supported our Patriot product improvement better than it has in recent years. So the marks against that were not as deep as they have in previous years. They're supporting, IBCS. They're also going after the PAC-3 program and making sure that they provide us with the necessary support. Obviously, in 17, the number of MSE missiles that we're buying is going to drop, but they continue to support us. I guess what I would say, and this is kind of shameless, but I would say that it's very, very important that we continue to engage members of Congress and particularly the staffers. And I think we can do that and not get out in front of the department, but I think those engagements are critically important. Many of you assisted in engaging the department last September, where we were looking at different modernization efforts associated with the Patriot system. That was very beneficial, especially as you have new members of Congress or new members of their staff that come onto the team, making sure that they truly understand from an operational standpoint the importance of these modernization efforts. What does it mean to the warfighter out there? What does it mean to be able to exploit the capabilities of MSE missile, that capability out there? So I can't stress that enough. I know there's always a little trepidation, so to speak, to go over there, but armed with the facts, I think it can be very, very powerful. Turning to the global missile defense, we're continuing to receive support in both Kwajalein and at Fort Greely. But that said, I was in a conference yesterday, and Congressman Franks made the point that if you look at the FY17 budget, there's an $800 million decrement in ballistic missile defense. And it's primarily in the MDA accounts, but that's significant for FY17, $800 million. And again, that's a number that Mr. Franks, Congressman Franks, shared with us. But that was his read of the recent budget that was submitted. As you know, the FY16 National Defense Authorization requires the chairman to issue a report that looks at not only our current demands on the team in terms of ballistic missile defense, but also looking into the future from a global perspective. I recently had a chance to review that report. I think it's right now going through STRATCOM. We'll go back up to the Joint Staff for the chairman's review before it goes back to Congress. But again, it continues to paint the picture, which we all are aware of, that the demand signals are not going down. They're only increasing in their numbers. Also, the report recommends that not only do we need to maintain the force structure in this area, but also we need to kind of broaden the way we talk about this area from just ballistic missiles or air defense to really embrace integrated air and missile defense. And that is something that I think there's efforts across the department that's getting after that. But that is, I think that's a very good recommendation that we all need to embrace. As many of you know, the Chief, General Odierno, before he left, designated SMDCR Strat to work with Fire Center and the PEO Missiles in Space and others to really get after the integration of missile defense for the Army. We're basically charged with looking at the 2012 vision that was put out there, update it where necessary, but also to help the department with recommendations on how do we get after force planning, how do we look at combat and material development, how do we get after strategic communications. And to really get after this, what we've really come up with is 4 lines of effort. Number 1, attaining network mission command. Number 2, defeating the full range of air and missile defense threats that are out there. Number 3, critically important, building partner capacity. And number 4, obviously, transforming the force. And, I can tell you that kind of a heady proposition, but I want to publicly say thank you to all those that participated in that effort. It's an ongoing effort, and we recently had a chance to update the 2012 strategy. I'll talk about that in just a second. But our review of the strategy found this, that number 1, basically we're investing in the right areas. It's relevant. It needs to be rescoped in certain areas, but we're kind of putting the monies where we need to. What we also have to do, and General Sullivan mentioned this, got to make sure that we're in line with the Army operating concept, Army campaign plan. We can't be going off on a tangent. We got to make sure that we tie that back to those foundation documents. We have to also evolve from just a materiel, but a more comprehensive Doppler PF perspective. Again, looking at the 2012 strategy, step in the right direction. We have I recently released the Waypoint 1, which is a kind of a bridging strategy to a more holistic strategy that we're going to be producing in the near term. It's not necessarily a rewrite, but what it does is it really provides both current and near-term kind of recommendations on how we can make some possible adjustments. Although we're on the right track, don't have to tell you, more needs to be done. We all know about, we keep on using this term, a holistic approach. We need to be more holistic in air and missile defense operation. But what does that mean? It means that although we need to make some investments in terms of iron-on-iron applications like MSC missiles and whatnot, we also have to look at non-kinetic applications. That, I will tell you, non-kinetic, mainly because it's very cost-informed, but that's getting a lot of interest across OSD and across the department. How can we get after non-kinetics? And I can tell you, it's not a panacea. It is not a panacea. Directed energy is a great technology, but it's not a panacea. It's one of the options that we need to add to the warfighter's quiver. But we just have to make sure that we balance our expectations on what non-kinetics can do. But it is receiving a lot of interest because, quite frankly, if you look at most of our weapon systems, our platforms out there, it really is focused on the terminal phase of flight. Whether it's THAAD, Patriot, Aegis ships, or whatever, we're kind of on the receiving end. And we have the ground-based interceptors up at Greeley and at Vandenberg that take care somewhat of the mid-course. But how do we really get after the boost phase? How do we really address that? We had ABL. Many of you know about airborne laser of days gone by. But as we mature that technology, that has a lot of promise. Again, it gets back to expectation management and the maturity of that technology. But that is something that MDA is also looking at, is directed energy, and how can we really address boost phase operation, whether it's long loiter times of platforms above 65,000 feet that don't have to deal with climatic issues. How can we get in close proximity to the target, beam control, power output, all those other things that go into it. But I will say this. Directed energy, and many of you have heard me say this before, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when and to what degree. And we're working very, very closely with the Navy. You know, they have it right now on board for ship defense. We're working with MDA on their high-level aspects, and we're also looking at in terms of the IFPC program, Block 2, and working with General Rossi and his team to how we can incorporate that technology in future applications. Also, we have to do a better job of leveraging partner capacity. And again, many of you have heard me talk about this, but that is an issue that continues also to receive a lot of interest at the department level and how we can get after that. And I'll talk about that in just a second. Alleviating stress on the force. Many of you know that the DepSecDef himself has personally been involved in how can we alleviate the stress, especially on the Patriot force, meeting COCOM demand signals that are coming our way. And so we're looking at that from a number of different perspectives. Number one, looking at force structure modifications, looking at dismounted ICCs where we can more effectively, more efficiently use the air and missile defense capabilities that we have out there versus the full-up battalions, but basically expand the capabilities of the Patriot system with dismounted assets that are out there. We're also looking at accelerating the modernization efforts of the 35th Brigade, looking to shorten our deployments from the 12 down to 9 months. Just a few of the things that we're looking at. Again, no silver bullet. It really is a compilation of a lot of different efforts, whether it's material, whether it's policy issues that we're trying to look at to really alleviate the stress on the force. I talked about partner capacity. Recently had a chance to meet with our partners in the Nimble Titan exercise. I don't know if you all know about Nimble Titan. It's kind of a national level exercise. This past year, we've had 23 nations, 3 different large organizations like NATO participate in that exercise. And when you have, again, Republic of Korea and Japan talking about offensive, defensive integration, we had Australia in the room. We also had Oman and Saudi Arabia and UAE, obviously our NATO partners. But that's a great forum where we can really talk about some policy level issues that in some cases serve as a barrier from us truly embracing what the Allies bring to the table and making sure that that we're as efficient with everybody's capabilities versus just going it alone. One other thing about partner capacity, and obviously we're never going to risk the homeland defense aspects of this, but where we can truly embrace partners into the BMDS architecture and have them really take on a key role in missile defense, that provides us with a lot of flexibility. That provides us with the ability to off-ramp in certain areas of the world where we're already forward stationed to go address a unanticipated event and have our partner nation maybe pick up that mission temporarily until we're able to redeploy and assume. I mean, that's just some aspects that we're looking at to give us more options, more flexibility. And so, again, there's a lot of efforts in that area, really trying to come up with a partner or a pilot example of where we can truly integrate a partner nation into the BMDS architecture and use that as an example where we can do it elsewhere in the world, obviously depending upon partner nations' capabilities and their own caveats that they may have. Turning to global missile defense, I can tell you that at Fort Greely and at Vandenberg, making some much-needed improvements in modernization efforts to that capability. As you all know, the 100th Missile Defense Brigade, that National Guard full-time unit, 24/7, 365, that operate that capability up at Fort Greely, Alaska, and down in Vandenberg. We're continuing to do what we can do with MDA to really improve that capability. Recently had a test with a CE2, the Capability Enhancement 2 version of the GBI. Very successful test. And what that allowed us to really do is to utilize alternate divert thruster technologies, as well as to really increase our ability to discriminate a threat complex and be able to find the lethal target. A huge step ahead, and I could not be more happy and proud of what MDA, Jim Searing, are doing to get after that capability. In addition to that, as you all know, we're increasing the number of interceptors in the ground. We're going from 30 to 44. We expect to have all 44 up and operational by the end of FY17. We're also making some improvements to the command and control network software architecture in regards to that capability, looking at cyber vulnerabilities, making sure that we stay ahead of any kind of threat capabilities that are out there. We're also increasing the effectiveness of the GBI fleet by putting an in-flight interceptor communications site at Fort Drum. What this does is it allows us to have more frequent communication links with interceptors on flight and to provide really even better track quality data to the interceptor while in flight. So that obviously increases the effectiveness of that system to protect the homeland. I'm trying to go fast because I want to get to your questions here. EPAA, as you all know, on track. Expect to get to an operational capability this summer in Romania, FY18 in Poland. Again, that capability, I keep on reassuring folks, it was never designed and it is not in place to address threats emanating from Russia. That system is in Europe to protect against threats emanating from the Middle East. And that's a very, very important issue to recognize. But again, MDA is well on the way to meeting the timelines to get that system operational in Romania and in Poland. We're also looking, and you've probably seen this in some of the media reports, we're also looking at PMRF, Pacific Missile Range Complex there in Kauai. And whether or not, and we're just discussing it, whether or not we want to convert that Aegis Ashore capability that we have there, which is serving in a test mission right now, do we want to operationalize that? Do we really want to bring that on board to provide even more layers of defense to protect Hawaii and the region? And so that's something there's a lot of discussions that are going on. Obviously, the Chinese aren't too pleased with that discussion. But that is something that's receiving a lot of thought, and so we'll see where we go with that decision. But again, more to follow. Talked a little bit about high energy lasers. I think many of you know that we have the high energy laser tactical vehicle. It's one of only 4 Army capability enablers that were selected. What we're looking at is to really integrate all the different components onto a single platform that gives us that beam control, power output, and resilience to be able to support the maneuver force. And so more work is being done on that. We're looking to increase the power output from 50 up to 50 kW, then on to 100 kW. I think you probably have to get into the hundreds of kW if you really want to address a cruise missile threat. So more to be done on that. But we're working very, very closely with Fire Center of Excellence as well as PEO Missiles in Space on how we can further take that technology forward and integrate that into the IFPC program down the road, possibly. Okay. In conclusion, I think you can see that we're all in this together. Whether you're an industry partner, whether you're one of our other services, sister services that are out there, whether you're academia, we are all in this together. And so making sure that we cross-talk and share information and that we provide our leaders with a cogent, comprehensive, well-informed, cost-informed set of options is critically important. And I just want to say thank you to all those organizations that I have the privilege to have served alongside over these last 2.5 years. I just want to say thank you for helping me and helping SMDC RSTRAT and the Fire Center of Excellence provide our leaders with options. God bless you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, I'm trying to make sure I can read this. What capability gap does IFPC Inc. 1, increment 1 fill, does it address the shore gap? Somewhat, but I think it's not. I think we got to be very, very careful where we have one system or one program that's a panacea to address all aspects. That is a technology that provides our soldiers with the ability to address some of those RAM threats, some of those low altitude, lower tier threats that are out there. But I think we also, in addition to IFPC, have to also look at our structure, how we are structured, how do we update the way we're currently configured on the battlefield to really support the warfighter, but also stay ahead of the threat. What IFPC does is it gives us that 360 capability. It also allows us to address threats across a spectrum, but it's incremental. And you saw in the chart, the Lyra chart there, block 2 and how down the road that is in terms of directed energy and some of the other things. Multi-mission launcher, that capability that gives us the ability to select the right interceptor for that iron-on-iron shot that we need to take. So, any other questions about that? Okay. Would you describe the op-tempo challenges facing the AMD force, especially THAAD and Patriot? Thank you, sir. They're only increasing exponentially. The other hat that I have the honor of serving is JFCC IMD, Joint Functional Component Command for Integrated Missile Defense, and Captain Chris Halton here is the deputy of that organization, and so we see a lot of the demand signals that come in from the COCOMs, and there has not been any kind of a degrade or lessening of those requests that are coming into JFCC IMD in terms of missile defense support. We meet with the COCOMs, we understand what their deficiencies are and their gaps, and then we make recommendations up through STRATCOM to the Joint Staff on how do we get after ballistic missile defense. How do we apportion those limited assets, whether it's Aegis ships, whether it's THAAD, whether it's Patriot. So there has not been any lessening whatsoever. I think there's only been an increase. And what I would say also is, like I said up front, the threat does not want to go force on force with any of our capabilities. But what they do want to do is exploit, where possible, any gaps or vulnerabilities that we may see. So whether it's cyber, getting into our networks, or ballistic missiles, which are cheap but can have a strategic effect, that's where we're seeing a lot of the demand signals coming to. So again, sir, there is no reduction in the requests that are coming our way. You have to bear with me here. Okay. An AOA, I think it is, came out and found that the best solution against future threats is to develop the integrated air and missile defense system, moving beyond Patriot modernization. But to do that, the Army needed to move money into FY17. Where is the Army in deciding how to afford moving beyond Patriot to IMD? Decision was due, but has not appeared to be made yet. Probably let some of the other panels talk about this because we'll probably get into this. But one of the things that I think, and I've made this point to many folks, when you look at IBCS and the componentization of the Patriot system, when you look at IFPC and what that brings to the fight in terms of multi-mission launcher and 360 and all the other things that are associated with that, at the end of the day, Patriot is going to be with us for many, many years to come. Okay? And whether it's the partners out there that have the system or our force internal to the Army, it's going to be with us. And so I think what we have to recognize is that there are some some critical, both near and midterm modernization efforts that we need to make. Because even if we had, a technology out there that just revealed itself overnight, we would not be able to bring that to fruition and really man the force for many years to come. So we're looking at other technologies. We're looking at how we can do things in a cost-informed manner. But when we talk about the next step ahead, we have to do so and do so from a expectation management standpoint. Don kind of talked about S&T and how keeping things in the S&T environment, never being able to get really to fielding a capability. So I'm all about looking at how we can make improvements. I'm all about looking at leap ahead technology. All I'm saying is we have to balance our expectations and make sure that we get as much out of that capability that the taxpayer has already invested in to the maximum extent possible. And then as we can incrementally transition to other technologies, we can do that. And we are looking at that. But it seems like sometimes we get into this do loop where we're always looking ahead to the next gee whiz, exquisite technology out there. And a lot of times, if we're not careful, we'll find ourselves sub-optimizing the capabilities that we already have on the team. That's just my opinion, but that's kind of how I see it. What is the status of OSD's response to the 8-star memo? I think you saw that the chairman and the SecDef came back and basically said, the recent JICM-4 study, Joint Capabilities Mix study that came out, we needed to take a look at that. We're still kind of chewing on the results of the JICM-4 mix study and what that means. But I think the most I see coming out of that 8-star memo is more of an acceptance by OSD to look beyond, in two areas, to look beyond kinetic and look at non-kinetic, and also a willingness to more address the issue of foreign disclosure, data sharing, integration of our partner, our coalition partners out there. That's what I see really coming out of that. More of a willingness to have those dialogues about policy-related issues with integration of allies, as well as non-kinetics. I'm probably taking up everyone else's time here, but given the emphasis on the need for directed energy integration into SHORAD, does the start of IFPC Inc. 2, Increment 2 at 21 or 21, 22 makes sense, especially considering cruise missile challenge? Hey, listen, at the end of the day, it's all about resources. If I had it, and I think General Rossi probably feels the same way, if we could have those resources provided to us today, depending upon the maturation of the technology, like directed energy, we would jump on it right now. But we also have to realize that there are priorities, finite resources, and there are priorities. We understand the chief. Readiness is number one. No other number one priority out there. We got to get our BCT fleet up, BCT team up to where they need to be in terms of readiness, and we can do so and walk it and chew gum at the same time. So this is something we would love to have more resources, but we also have to understand that there are priorities that it has to compete against. Number one, and number two, we got to make sure that the technology is mature enough to really integrate it into the program. Okay, I think almost done here. What does the Navy think about increasing the number of Aegis ashore sites? Will they at some point try to push the mission to the Army? What is the Army's position? I haven't heard them talking about pushing it to the Army. I will say that when you talk to the Navy, their concern is about the number of BMT ships that they're having to get. I mean, obviously, those ships are multi-mission platforms, okay, and they have a lot of different missions that they have to get after. And so there is concern. Right now, I think we have 33 BMD ships on the team. And I think if you look at the requirement, and don't quote me, but I think we're in the 70s or low 80s on what the actual requirement would be. That's a tremendous bill. And that also takes those platforms out of their other multi-mission roles. That's one of the reasons why the Navy was very excited about putting TPY-2s in Japan. Why? Because it would free up some of the Aegis fleet to go do other things rather than just being tied up for that mission set there. So I think And again, I just ask you to touch base with the Navy, but I think that they're willing to at least look at Aegis Ashore, especially if it frees up some of the BMD ship mission out there. But again, I'll let them speak for themselves in that regard. Okay. Okay, sir, could you talk about policy insights with regard to interoperability that came out of Nimble Titan? Is there any effort being put toward making it easier to connect to multiple countries? I think what's really coming out of those Nimble Titan exercises, and it's really something when you get the military folks, the folks who are in uniform, when they get to talk, they're a little bit more open, candid. Nothing against the policy folks, but that's just my experiences. They're really willing to talk about whether it's THAAD in the peninsula. They want to have those discussions. I think what really comes out of that is a better understanding of nation caveats and some of the challenges that they face within their countries, within their political forums, and how they struggle to really share their military advice in some cases, and how their recommendations are being addressed. But I think the more we get Secretary Rose is participating in these exercises, the more we get the State Department and those civilian forums or organizations involved in Nimble Titan, I think we'll do a better job of getting after some of the policy-related issues. And Jan, thanks for the question. But I would say that there's a lot more candid discussions about their integration into the BMDS. Used to be a lot of times we get a lot of stiff arm, a lot of caveats. There's a lot more willingness, maybe it's because of the nature of the threat, to really say, hey, listen, these are the actions that you can count on us to be part of. And so it's a lot more candid than it has been in the past. Okay, I think that's about it. Any other questions that you may have? Again, I apologize for going over time here. But what I would say, and just looking at the size of the audience here, I think more and more folks are recognizing the fact that the nature of the threat, cyberspace, missile defense, is only going to grow in its relevance. And I would also say what Mr. Tyson was saying, when you look relatively at how missile defense programs are faring next to other portfolios, we're doing okay in comparison with other portfolios out there. So again, a lot of it's because of your engagements and your advocacy. So again, thank you very much. I appreciate your questions, and God bless.